Allah the Almighty. According to Islamic vision of life, the start and end of life is by God only. Indeed, we belong to Allah, and to Him do we indeed return. Quran 2:156. Since He is the source of life and existence, then surely He is the essence of existence and the source of the infinite. If any living being is described as having a trait, we must wonder about the source of that trait and how that being came to possess it. This applies unless the trait is inherent to the being or the being is itself the trait. If, for example, you find that your book is wet, you may ask about the reason why, but you will never wonder about the reason for the wetness of the water itself, because the wetness is a trait inherent within the water. Since the characteristic of existence is not an inherent one for all creatures and beings, these creatures and beings were nothing before they existed. Based on this, we must question the source of their existence. This question leads us to Allah Almighty, who is the source of existence itself. So God does not exist in the same sense that everything else exists, but rather He is existence itself, and therefore all things that exist come from Him the way that wetness comes from water and light comes from the sun. And because God Almighty is the essence of existence, and where there is no existence, there is nothingness, and nothingness does not exist, He is a single existence, simple, not comprised of parts, and absolute, not mixed with anything, pure existence. Therefore, He is not subject to perception, let alone being seen, for He has no boundaries, constraints, or limitations by which He can be perceived. If He was observable, then He would be a being like ourselves and would need the essence of existence from the source in order to exist. This shows us how God has all the characteristics and qualities of perfection and infallibility and is free from any shortcomings and defects. It shows us that His attributes are His being, and His being are His attributes. For His might is His wisdom, His sight and hearing, and all His attributes are united in His essence of a simple, singular existence. This is also why it is impossible that there can be another God, for the existence of another God implies that He is something other than God. There is nothing other than God, except nothingness, for He is the essence of all existence. And if there were other gods, then each god would be limited by the other gods and could therefore be perceived by these limitations. This means that they would exist the same way that everything else exists and not be the essence of existence, Allah Almighty. Beings and objects do not limit God Almighty. For their existence, even though real, is only in relation to God, and they exist thanks to Him. Otherwise, the existence of the Almighty would be limited by His creations. The Quran and the Hadiths emphasize extensively that Allah exists everywhere and is not limited by any place. And even though we actually exist in reality, we remain manifestations of the divine presence. This is very much like the fact that light and heat are manifestations of the sun, but they are not the sun. And at the same time, their presence is not contrary to the presence of the sun. And to Allah belongs the east and the west. So wherever you might turn, there is the face of Allah. Indeed, Allah is all-encompassing and knowing. Quran 2:115. And we have already created man, and know what his soul whispers to him, and we are closer to him than his jugular vein. Quran 50:16. God Almighty is the one and only. There is nothing like Him. He is ancient, yet ongoing and everlasting. He is the first and the last, all-knowing, wise, just, ever-living, capable, all-sufficient, all-hearing, all-seeing, and never to be described in the same way as other beings. He is not an object or an image, not essence nor visible. He has no weight or lightness, no movement or stillness, no limits of place or time, and He cannot be shown. He has no likeness or partner, no opponent, no companion or son, no partner, and no one is like Him. The eyes cannot see Him, but He sees the eyes. Imam Ali. My God cannot be described by scale or motion or stillness or ability. He is in all things, but is not the amalgamation of them. He is beyond any comparison, above everything without anything above Him, in front of everything but without any facade, inside everything but not in the way all other things are inside, and outside of them but not in the way all other things are outside.